I'm going to call the meeting to order, and Ms. Ben is going to give us the invocation and the pledge.
Our Heavenly Father, we come before you today, and as we're entering a season of thankfulness, please remind us to be thankful for everything that we are granted by you and all the blessings that we have because of you. We are also thankful, especially this day, and want to acknowledge the leadership that Steve Sorrell has provided to the ECUA and all that has been accomplished during his time here. We wish him the best, and please bless him as he begins the next phase of his life. Be with us all as we go through this meeting today to make good decisions and thoughtful decisions affecting the ratepayers of the ECUA in our community. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We move now to the adoption of agenda. Do you have any additions, corrections, or amendments? Dr. Walker, did you have something you wanted to add, sir?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Mr. Kevin Hammer, who was my previous appointee to this committee, has resigned, and I would like to ask the board members present to approve the appointment of Mr. Joe Inkle as my new appointee to the as the new representative of District 5 as an appointee on this committee.
So we're going to add that to the top of the agenda, right?
Yes.
So can we get a vote adding?
Well, Joe, don't worry, I'm not going to say any of the bad things. I know Joe because he's been president of my neighborhood association for, it seems like, 10 of the last 11 years. And he, and in the 11th year, his wife was. He's just one of those people who serves the community in volunteer capacities that no one else wants to take on. And he lives in, like he lives in District 5, and he's will make a great representative of the citizens of District 5 on this committee, as shown by his service to his own neighborhood for all these years. I asked the fellow board members sitting on the committee today to approve his appointment.
And of course, any nominee that you make, I would certainly approve, because you always bring us interesting, engaged people. Will we have a resume for him next week when we're looking at all of the other nominees? It's always just nice and interesting to see the resumes.
Well, in fact, it's a requirement of the bylaws of the ECUA. The staff has a resume. I think somehow we let it fall between the cracks. I should have made sure it happened. I'm sorry. But there is a resume, and we can send it out to all the board members.
Thank you.
One other question. Mr. Sorrell, normally the CAC members don't vote on the CAC members, so we don't need to vote?
No, ma'am. The CAC members have no say-so in this.
So,
It has to be nominated by a board member, and then it has to be confirmed by a majority of the board. But you can only do that after you've had the resume and had time to look at it.
right. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, then I will change my request and simply ask that Mr. Inkle be allowed to sit with the committee today, and we will approve his appointment next month. I might explain to Mr. Inkle that it's very unusual for us to have an appointee, a new appointee, in a year like this. Typically, it only happens in election years, and is formalized then. But we'll get it worked out.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins?
Would actually approve them next week, but the meeting he'd vote on would be next month. So at next week's board meeting would be approving them.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, welcome, Joe. You won't be able to vote today, but has anybody ever told you you look like Bobby Bowden? And today you especially do because you have the FSU shirt on. But welcome, and you're welcome to sit up here today and partake, and you can
Feel free to participate in discussion, too.
in discussion. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Just the vote will have to wait until we approve it next week, but you're very welcome to be here. Okay, we move now to open forum.
Ms. Campbell?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Benson.
Pursuant to that subject, have all of the CAC members indicated their willingness to serve again?
I
Have you heard
believe
Mr.
so. Albert Hanson?
I was going to send that out to you. We haven't got the confirmation yet from Mr. Ponson. Everybody else has agreed they'll serve again, but Mr. Ponson has not responded.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what he wants to do, but the ladies will be sending that out probably Thursday, I think.
Okay.
I was going to ask him today, but he's not here, so.
Thank you.
I have a question, please.
Ms. Schneider?
Do I need to resubmit my curriculum vitae? I mean, y'all already have it from the last 2
No.
years, my resume?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Only new members. So we move now to open forum, and I don't have any pink sheets, and I don't see anyone in the audience. So we move now to approval of the minutes, and they're on page 5 of your agenda. Do I have a motion?
Move the approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Ben. And Ms. Booker?
A second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Not, please vote. And it passes 8-0. We move now to item F, Engineering Services Proposal Approval, RW 817, East Tank Rehab on page 13. Mr. Sorrell, you want to bring us up to speed on this?
Yes, ma'am. Each year, we try to inspect, we have to actually inspect every single tank that we have. And as they need certain work, we schedule them because it's very expensive to have them rehabilitated. In this particular instance, we're getting ready to rehabilitate, paint basically, strip and paint the east tank. As part of that, we have a proposal here from Tank Industry Consultants, who's our tank consultant. And basically, this is to administer the contract and to have a person, a certified inspector on hand during the actual painting and construction work. And that's very, very important in something like this because those tanks are kind of difficult to paint. They're high in the air. Moreover, it's kind of funny, but they have to shroud those tanks. And if we get a windy day, we get requests from everybody within 4 blocks to paint their car, so, especially in certain neighborhoods. So this is very, very important. This is the TICs, the firm that we've used in the past. They do great work. They're familiar with our tanks. And the recommendation in front of you is for them to do that service, the construction specifications, and then we'll bid it. And then they will have a certified on-site inspector during the entire painting project, which will take several months. The cost for this is about $108,277. That does not include the painting. The painting itself will probably be about $800,000 plus or minus.
Move approval.
Second.
Any conversation, question? If not, please vote. And it passes 8-0. We move now to the renewal of the annual unit price contract for sanitary sewer lining, lateral lining excavating repair. It's R1706 on page 16. Do I have a motion? Contract extension, Ms. Benson.
Oh, no.
Do I have a motion?
Move the staff recommendation.
Ms. Ben, second. Ms. Ritz?
I second, and I have a question.
Yes, ma'am?
Okay. Where are these proposed future sanitary sewer laterals in need of rehabbing? Where in the area are they?
Mr. Sorrell, I believe they're all over.
Yes, ma'am, they're in the entire service district. Every home that is served with sanitary sewer service has a lateral from our main to the house. We do not main that, but what we found is that probably in excess of 50% of the I&I that's coming into our system, that's rainwater and so on, that's coming into our system is coming in through these laterals. So we've done a lot of lining of our mains, and as part of that process, then we moved to the laterals. And we're looking at from the main to the public right-of-way, where we will inspect and replace. We'll usually install clean-outs and things like that. And then the rest of it will be the responsibility of the private property owner. So we're in the process now through our I&I program to where they're starting to work on these private laterals, because we think more than 50% of the I&I is coming in from them.
Thank you, Mr. Sorrell. Any further questions? If not, please vote. And it passes 8-0. We move now to item H, which is a presentation by ECUA Sanitary Sewer System Demands by Mr. Stacy Hayden. Thank you, Stacy.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to bring to you an update on a situation on 9 Mile Road in the vicinity just east of Pine Forest Road. Want to provide you with an update as well as some other issues and our proposed solution that we got moving forward. As you know, we have several capacity issue over in that area, and we have a couple of projects in the works. One is a force main replacement that we did some cost sharing with a couple of developers. That force main is a 6-inch diameter force main that we're replacing with a 12-inch line that will provide additional capacity in the future to handle those developments and potentially provide a small amount of capacity for additional development down the road. This project, we cost shared with those two developers, 3 projects, but it was for about $300,000. We anticipate that project will be completed by the end of this year. So it's part of it is actually online now, and the remaining, I guess 75% of that project will be online at the end of this year is what we're anticipating. The other project is the replacement of lift station 50. That's an older lift station. If you recall, that is located in the right-of-way of Detroit Boulevard. The reason I say you may be familiar with it is that we had a car run off into the wet well because it's so close to the roadway. It just, veered off the road, ran right into the wet well. It's a dangerous location to work in. It's a very small lift station with limited capacity, and that's one of the reasons why we're replacing it. There's a lot of inflow and infiltration issues in that area, and we need that extra capacity. When we do replace that lift station, it's going to provide extra capacity for development, and I should have pulled this up earlier, please excuse me. So as you can see, lift station 50 on Detroit Boulevard there, the brown line at the bottom, mid to the bottom of the screen, that represents the force main that is currently under construction that we are replacing, that goes to lift station 10 in the bottom right of the screen. Also in this capacity limited area is lift station 387, which is almost dead center of the screen. And we have the other project is to install a gravity sewer from lift station 387 south to the new proposed lift station number 50. So if we're moving on forward here, and I apologize, the colors don't show up too well here, but essentially you have parcels that are colored in green and orange. The 2 parcels that are colored in green, those are the 2 developers that we were working with to cost share for the upgrade of the force main. The other developments in orange did not want to participate. Some of them are new, some of them are older, but some of them did not want to participate at the time with the cost sharing of the force main. We have told many of these developers that hey, we don't have capacity right now, but if you want to wait until the construction of the new lift station 50, which is out for bid now, we anticipate that it will be awarded hopefully at the December board meeting if we get some good contract prices, and that construction of that new lift station will be complete probably around the spring of 2021. That's a conservative estimate, but we want to be conservative based on past experience with issues that pop up during construction that can delay completion. So in front of you in this slide, the orange parcels are those developments which have proposed development to ECUA that are not currently approved because we just don't have the capacity at the moment. So some of the developments, some of the developers have chosen to wait till the force main's constructed and then they can connect, which will be December. That's no problem. The remaining developers, you've probably gotten a lot of complaints for some of the developers because they want to connect now. Time is money for them, understandably. And we have come up with a proposition for those developers and said, okay, we want to, we have identified some components that we can replace in lift station 387 that will provide additional capacity for those developments. It would be the installation of new pumps, larger pumps, the replacement of the electrical control panel to handle the larger pumps, and additional underground storage. The total cost of this is estimated at about $300,000, and we've had a meeting with all of the developers that are interested last week and proposed this idea saying, hey, look, if we can cost share this $300,000 between all of you, and that would come to equivalent about $3 per gallon to add to your development fees. They've all agreed in principle. However, we have to have an agreement from all the developers and have them sign off on it. And that's why I've asked Mr. Beasley. He's come to participate in the development and as well as support me here today. But we are asking for your support in that if we have an agreement drafted that's acceptable to the developers, that you may be able to act on it as early as the next board meeting. If we don't get the developers to participate this go around, then we will have to continue on with our standard policy, which is that they would have to wait until spring of 2021 to connect.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins has a question, I believe.
Well, no, it's a comment. I mean, that, to me, it seems like a really good, reasonable accommodation that we can do some engineering at a current lift station, somewhat dramatically increase that capacity, do it in a effective time, and then they're willing to participate financially in it. I mean, I applaud the engineering department on working with the stakeholders on this. I think it's a really good proposal, and would encourage you to proceed and try and get that agreement in place.
Thank you. You can continue.
Yes, Mr. Beasley may have a couple things to say. Thank you.
I wanted to add, if there were, I hung around in case there were any questions about what they're trying to accomplish here, but Mr. Perkins, I think, hit the nail on the head. What I witnessed was a meeting where the news started at, I know you want your connections now, but it's going to be 2021. However, the engineering department has worked very hard to come up with an alternative. It's going to cost some money. We need you to pitch in. And it was, the presentation had a little bit of a slow buy-in, but it ended, I will tell you, with every stakeholder there thanking the engineering department for the ingenuity, but also the focus on their perspective, which is, I know you need it now because your development's ticking away and time is money. And so it really was a great turnaround meeting where you had 5 or 6 or 7 angry developers, one of which was waiving some documents threatening to sue. Not that they had a basis to sue. Turned around into every single one of them congratulating Mr. Hayden on his initiative. This is a good model for maybe a way we can do things in the future in interim step processing like this, where we've got a project coming, but it's not there yet. Get the stakeholders together, have this discussion, present the engineering, and what he's actually asking you for today is just the authority to continue those negotiations, reach an agreement that they all find acceptable, because we are moving under a tight deadline, so that then at the next meeting, you may be able to be presented, the board may be able to present it either at this meeting or the next, with a contract signed and agreed by everyone else, subject to final approval by the board. That's actually the request today, is to get some level of approval of the authority to proceed with those negotiations.
Thank you. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, ma'am, it
Stacy?
does.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Perkins?
Well, this, addresses two primary issues that I've been really concerned with, and hopeful that we can find, solutions to. One is, particularly from people in the development community, I hear all the time that they don't feel like ECUA has a sense of urgency about them, and that with them, time is money, and when they've got a big loan on a project and they're not getting people in those places, they're losing money. And that affects the more important issue to me, which is affordable housing. Most of the country is starting to have a major crisis with affordable housing, and it's something that I have spoken about and felt strongly about, in this committee and at the board level before. Now, if we could come across with reasonable solutions like this that are not having our ratepayers, finance these improvements, but having the developers participate in a way that makes engineering sense and that will speed up the process, I think that's good. But the bigger picture is that we have to find ways to make housing affordable for citizens in the workforce. A lot of workforce people just cannot afford housing. I have a few little rentals that below a certain level, they go like that. They're not vacant a day. There's that big a demand, and people are desperate for housing. We have to make it to where people can afford it. Now, the truth is developers are going to charge what the market will bear. They're going to build and charge what the market will bear. But if we make it easier for all of them, then the naturally competitive economic forces acting will bring those prices down. And so we need to do anything we can to help with affordable housing. And I think this is a step in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Ms. Benson?
Well, I concur with everything that Mr. Perkins has said about working together with developers and being proactive and seeing this as a partnership and a business opportunity. I do always have to throw in, I'm concerned about leaving neighborhoods behind. I want affordable housing, but not at the expense of communities like Myrtle Grove and Warrington and so forth, where we're chasing new growth and throwing away. So I want to make sure that we're tending to the infrastructure, and I believe you are cognizant of that, of the existing neighborhoods and not just chasing the new growth.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments?
I would just say this is not, new, rural, beautiful. This is almost like urban infill here. This
Yeah.
is a pretty poor area, and it's an area that could benefit substantially from the economic improvement.
Thank you. Mr. Sorrell?
No, I just wanted to say one last thing, that all the good things were said are warranted. I want to compliment Stacy and his group for what they've come up with. He has been over to see me, I can't tell you how many times, and we've worked on this and worked on this. When we finally came up with this solution, this was one option. The other option was to go with what he told you, it's going to have to wait. And I told him, I said, let's present it to the CAC. We can live with either one, but this is the optimum. So I give Stacy and his group a lot of credit. And Don, they came up with something here that's going to work, and I think it lays a roadmap for us for the future. So thank you.
And I would like to compliment, the attorney as well, because I know that most people's instinct, and particularly an attorney, when somebody starts waving a paper and says we're going to sue, is to kind of bow up and come back at them and get confrontational. And it's, it's hard to resist that sometimes, but I think when people are kind of panicked and, they've got a lot on the line, they'll say a lot of confrontational things, and I will just tell them, look, I'm going to do what I think is the right thing. I won't be intimidated by anybody, but I do what I think is right, and I do understand your perspective. And I think that if we can do that and react in a rational way rather than an emotional way, it really helps. It helps everybody. So I appreciate both the engineering and the legal teams taking that approach.
Thank you very much, Stacy, for giving your presentation. And I agree. I want to say I also agree with Dale about Robert Beasley. Thank you very much for attending this meeting, number one, with Stacy, and for coming today to explain, you know, your thoughts on the whole process as well. I know Stacy's been working on it a long time, and a lot of this is up near my area, not that it's in my district, but I get the phone calls all the time from the pizza place that can't open and some others that are trying to develop. So I applaud your efforts here, and I'm very happy to get in front of it by meeting with the developers ahead of time and not having them come complain later. And I think they even knew that we were meeting today, so the fact that they're not here speaks volumes to me. So do I have anyone that wants to get a motion on the board to allow them? Thank you.
I'll
Ms.
move the
Benson?
recommendation.
Second.
Well, there, no.
Yeah.
I move the proposed plan for cost sharing of these lift stations. So do what you need to do.
To get the agreement back to us. Okay. Do I have a second? Ms. Ritz?
I second the motion, and again, I think that was very wise, working with the developers.
Thank you, ma'am. I've got to say that I can't take this, these accolades myself. This was Mr. Sorrell, this was Don Palmer, this was our attorney, this was staff that I was working with. I got to give them the props. I was just kind of the middleman trying to bring it all together here. Without them, this would not have happened. But I appreciate it. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you
It's a
very
good
much.
team. It's a good team model, too.
And it takes good communication to bring two sides to the middle, so we appreciate you. Please vote. Oh, there it is. Nope. And I think he's going to bring us back. And it passes 8-0. Thank you very much, and I hope we see you back here next week with the agreement. Okay, we move now to item I, which is an acquisition of a granular activated carbon GAC filter vessel on page 19. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Ms.
Second.
Schneier.
Second.
Mr. Perkins, any questions, comments? If not, please vote. And it passes 8-0. We move now to item J, which is the granular activated carbon GAC CC 2019-27 project on page 22. Mr. Sorrell, do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, ma'am. We competitively bid the GAC granular activated carbon that we use for the filter media. We received the bids, and the two top bids both had legal irregularities in them, and the legal counsel has recommended that we reject both bids and rebid it, and that's what I'm recommending.
Do I have a motion?
Move the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Ben. Do I have a second? Ms. Booker?
A second.
Thank you very much. Any comments, questions? Ms. Ritz?
What kind of repairs and what were the causal factors of this issue?
Mr. Sorrell?
This particular issue is it's the filters for them and actually having them replaced, and they just corrode over time. The big filters that you see, they corrode over time and they have to be repaired. So we bid the media and repairs at the same time. So it's just a corrosion factor.
Do you have other questions, Ms. Ritz?
I don't know how to pronounce the word radionuclides. Is that it? Okay. What are they?
That's a natural occurring radioactive isotope that is in this area of the country, and it shows up in water from time to time. There are maximum contamination limit, MCL limits for that. None of our wells are even close to that. At one time, there was thought that it was before I came here, and 17 years ago I was asked to take a look at that. And what I found was we took in samples and sent 2 samples, split samples, same exact water, to 2 different labs and got 2 different results. Well, the reason for that is 5 years ago they couldn't really test to the parts per trillion level. Okay, so now that, and there were only 4 labs in the country that could test for radionuclides. So bottom line is we're encountering some of that now with the parts per trillion testing. You know, we just had it with the PFCs or PFOAs. There's several different things that are used to describe those now. I think they're using PFAs. They were using PFOAs, and they were using PFOSs. But anyway, I think they're using the newest one. But PFCs, basically, we sent it off and sent a split sample, got 2 different results again because it's the parts per trillion. I mean, that's to give you an example of what that means. Most people don't know. Parts per billion, which used to be the old standard, about a drop in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Parts per trillion is like a drop in Escambia Bay. So they're trying to test to that level. And basically, there just aren't any laboratories that can really do it, and most of them don't do it very accurately yet. So that's what the problem was.
Is Calgon the only, well, I noticed you had, well, there were 2 bidders. Are they going to be willing to rebid since their prices are now on display? Wouldn't that be a hindrance?
Good question, Mr. Sorrell.
Well, actually, what they're doing is they're honoring the prices they gave us in 2016. So these prices are from 3 years ago that were competitively bid at that time. So through some negotiations and some various other things, they've decided to honor that 2016 price. Every GAC vessel we have in the ECUA is a Calgon vessel. We prefer to stay with them because of the piping and the various maintenance procedures and so on associated with that, and because of the filter media. But one of 2 things: either they gave us a competitively bid price 3 or 4 years ago that was pretty high, or they're giving us a really good price now. So I'm not sure which one's which. But basically, they're honoring a 2016 price, and I don't think you could get that price anywhere else.
I think we have moved on to the item J, which is, I think you were talking about the 20,
No, we were on J.
yeah,
Still
but I
on
think
J.
Mr. Sorrell was relating to item I.
But he was just kind of answering the question.
okay.
I mean, the recommendation is to reject the bids and-
Right.
and rebid, you know, and
So
to
I think
rebid.
her question is, if we reject the bids, why would they?
I was surprised that Jacoby bid it since Calgon is the designer of the tank and the filters.
Did you understand the answer?
Yes, I
Okay,
did.
thank you. That's all I was trying to get to. Dr. Walker?
Madam Chair, I think we had already
We
approved
had,
a recommendation on I, and we were discussing J. I think
Yeah.
we already had a motion, in fact.
and her question was just on the bid, so I was having him go back.
If I may comment on that.
Yes, sir, please do.
I doubt that the correction of the irregularities in the bids would affect the prices
Right,
that they propose. It's just probably something that technically they didn't do correctly in the bid, which surprises me with respect to Calgon, because they've been bidding on our carbon replacements for 30 years, 40 years. You'd think they'd know how to do it right, but I don't think it'll be a serious problem.
I don't think it'll change the bid either. But it was a good question. Thank you, Ms. Ritz. Any further comments, questions? If not, please vote. And it passes 8-0. We move now to residential sanitation truck replacement lease program on page 25. Mr. Sorrell, do you want to give us the difference in these trucks?
Yes, ma'am. The board had approved buying 8 trucks previously, and the order was recently canceled. Don't know exactly why, but I got to believe from what I've been hearing that there was a patent infringement issue involved with that, and I think there's some legal matters going on. We've not been privileged to all the information, but basically that's what we're getting. So we're having, instead of buying the truck that we want, we're having to buy another truck. The chassis The engine, the Cummins engine, stuff's all the same. It's the actual packer unit that goes on the back of the truck is what we're have to buy differently. The ones that we wanted have like a screw auger in them in order to compress the solid waste that we collect. It's a relatively low maintenance item. The ones that we're having to buy are different. They have a hydraulic ram and they have sliding rails on the side. Well, over time, the sliding rails wear, and over time, the hydraulic ram wears out, and there's just a lot more maintenance on it. It works, don't misunderstand me. We have some like this, we've used them before. We just like the screw auger better because it just holds up better. But in this particular case, we don't have any choice, and we've got to have these trucks pretty quickly.
Thank you. Ms. Benson?
I'll move the approval, and I have a question.
Thank you, Ms. Benson. Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ms. Benson?
What's the life expectancy of these trucks, if I might ask, Mr. Sorrell?
I think what we're recommending is to buy them on a 7-year lease, but normally they're about 8 years.
And I know we're now doing robots in our recycling, and self-driving vehicles are certainly moving along quite quickly. Does anyone have any projection on when we might see self-driving sanitation vehicles?
We can't even get route where
can't
it
even get
works.
route.
Yeah, right.
So it may be a little while before we get a self-driving garbage truck, because we can't even get any software that'll tell us which house to pick up or where, so it's gonna be a while.
Well, I mean, it's just one of those things that there are gonna be all these growing pains, and then all of a sudden, one day, it's all going to come together, and I just didn't know if there were any industry-wide projections, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Benson. Dr. Walker?
Good Lord Almighty, that's a scary thought.
Garbage drones.
Garbage drones. Believe it or not, it will happen in our lifetime, and they will be driving those garbage trucks with a, little wand. Any further questions? Ms. Ritz?
I noticed it went from 8 to 9, so I was trying to find out where the 9th one would be. What happened to the yard trash prototype collection truck? Has that sort of evolved into nothingness, or?
Well, I think these were
Because
just,
I noticed it went from 8 to 9 trucks.
Mr. Sorrell.
Well, the prototype truck you're talking about was one that we would be able to use for yard trash. Right now, we collect the yard trash on the back and use an extra man or 2 men on the back of a truck. The prototype truck would pick it up from the side with a clamshell and load it into the truck and then compress it. The company that was going to build that for us is the one that's involved in litigation, so they canceled the contract on that truck, and nobody else has been willing to build that at this juncture.
But it sounds like you're going to an extra truck, but not like a prototype. I don't-
Generally, that's correct.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Ritz? Further questions, ma'am? If, the one thing I don't like about not getting those other trucks was the one side opening, so that less of those little bags that were able to escape out, but, Mr. Perkins?
With growth projections and everything, with what we see going on around Detroit and Ashland and all the other growth that's going on here, is one truck going to be enough, one extra truck, or have we really looked at
Mr.
it?
Sorrell?
No, but it's all we can afford. I mean, we could use 20 trucks tomorrow, and but right now that's basically all we can afford, and we're putting them in a scheduling. If you remember back a number of years ago, we bought all the trucks at one time. Well, what that meant, all the trucks went bad at one time. So now we're trying to schedule them and buy 6 to 10 a year, so that we don't have that problem ever again.
Mr. Sorrell, I know that we're in talks about a transfer station. Would that make the trucks that we have seem like we had enough trucks?
Yes, it would help tremendously. If we don't get a transfer station with the amount of growth and so on that's taken on, we're going to have to add trucks and routes and drivers, and that's very expensive. We need a transfer station in the worst way, and it will control our costs to our ratepayers if we're able to get one.
Thank you, Ms. Ritz.
Just thinking, what would happen if, with the manufacturer that you're tentatively going to deal with, depending upon the board's final decision, is there any way to engineer the screw auger rather than the hydraulic? Is there any way to say to them, we would prefer this rather than this rail system? I can't imagine them, being so inflexible, and I'm not a mechanic or an engineer that I've designed, so, but when you go to buy a car, you can say, I want X, Y, and Z, and you get X, Y, and Z a little later, but rather than what's on the lot.
Mr. Sorrell?
That's really a patent design issue. That doesn't have anything to do, anybody can build anything, but you can't steal somebody else's design. And that's exactly what the legal issue is that's going on with the other trucks. We would love to have augers, but that's part of the legal issue, and we just can't do that.
I see, okay. All right.
I think that's why we find ourselves voting on this today, is because they couldn't get the trucks with that design because there was a patent, may have been some kind of patent issue. If there are no further questions, please vote. And it passes 8-0. Good discussion. We move now to, I'm sorry about that, item L, which is the award of bid of hydraulic oil on page 29. Mr. Perkins?
Move the recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Ms. Benson?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? If not, please vote. Ms. Benson, did you have a question? Okay. And it passes 8-0. We move now to item M, which is award a bid of a skid steer loader with a forestry package. And I'm told that that's a fancy word for a bobcat. Do I have a motion?
Move the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Ben. Do I have a second? Ms.
I
Ritz?
second.
Thank you. Any comments, questions about the bobcat? Ms. Ritz?
What happens to the trees and the vegetation that's handled by the Bobcat or forest package? Are they going to take that to the recycling? I mean, not recycling, the
Compost.
Composting?
Yes, ma'am, that's exactly what will happen to it. If it's anything that could be composted, we will actually take that over there and we'll run it through the tub grinder and we'll turn it into compost. Yes, ma'am.
Will there be a decision as to which trees are taken out versus those that are left for timber, perhaps?
That's probably not even going to be an issue because the area's already been cleared. It's already been in a forestation package. So all we're going to do now is just make it mostly around where our spray fields are at, keep it clean so we can manage and maintain our spray fields.
I'm sure we won't be taking down any heritage oaks or big trees. Any further questions or comments? If not, please vote. We move now to item, and it passes 8-0, sorry. We move now to the informational reports on page 34 and 35. Do we have any questions or comments on the informational reports? If not, we move to
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Ritz.
Today must be my question. Permission, have I run out yet? Is there-
Do a quarter each. No, I'm just kidding.
Is there any way to get the payment for the rate per ton to increase from $2 to a higher amount?
Mr. Sorrell.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, ma'am.
Okay, on the right side of the page.
Which page?
Page 34, dry products sold is the header, and rate per ton is $2. Is there any way to increase the rate to be paid higher than $2? In other words, who sets that rate? And are there any other potential buyers? Green South is buying it at $2 a ton.
Mr. Sorrell?
I still don't see where you're referring.
She's talking about the dry product that we sell to Green South.
That's on a competitively bid basis, and that's what they buy it, and no, there's nobody else that wants that at this point, because they have to land apply that, so no. At this point, we will competitively bid it when it comes due, but at this point, no.
Thank you, sir. We move now to unfinished business. We have none. We move to new business. And we have none. And we move to our second open forum, and there is no one here. So we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.